Hello, everybody. I am back for another movie review, and this time I'm going to review another childhood favorite that I grew up with as a kid, and this is The Last Starfighter. The Last Starfighter is a science fiction adventure film that came out back in 1984, and, well, obviously, from the looks of it, it kind of acts like a Star Wars imitator, which it practically is. And it also came out around the time video games started to become very popular. And I think, obviously, after the release of Tron and also the movie War Games, where, both movies seem to focus about playing video games, Last Starfighter kind of followed into that trend. The film is about a teenager named Alex Rogan, played in the film by actor Lance Guest, who basically lives in a trailer park and is desperately trying to escape his life there to try to, make a living for himself out there in the world. But unfortunately, he can't escape because he's like the practical everyday handyman. He's basically the go-to guy whenever somebody has a problem. So he obviously can't, ever have a chance to have fun for himself or have fun with his girlfriend Maggie, played by Catherine Mary Stewart. But the one thing he's really good at, though, is there's a Starfighter arcade machine right outside the local pub of the trailer park that he just enjoys playing, and that right there is probably the closest escape he actually has in getting away from the dull life he really has. And one night, he ends up breaking the high score and actually beating the game entirely, which ultimately causes a unknown person named Centauri, played by the late Robert Preston, to show up and ultimately whisk Alex off of Earth and to the faraway world of Rylos, where he's ultimately recruited to be an actual starfighter to fight in an intergalactic war. This does sound like a fever-pitch pipe dream for many filmmakers, but that's the thing. It really was. It was a perfect pipe dream ultimately turned into a feature-length movie. And that's pretty much what it was. And ultimately, well, it did succeed to a certain point. The movie actually was, unfortunately, not a box office hit, but overall, it did manage to surpass its actual budget. The film was made on a budget of like $15 million, and the film in the States grossed about 27 to 28 million. So while the movie was a profitable hit, unfortunately, it was not when you compare it to like Star Wars, because a lot of critics at the time, while the movie did receive positive reviews, the film was often looked at as like an imitator or a clone of Star Wars, which it pretty much was meant to be. And at the time, well, of course, usually the trend is whenever a big movie comes out, there's always going to be like a bunch of films that are going to try to imitate it. So after Star Wars came out, I'm sure there were a lot of movies that tried to act much like it. Sort of around the time when Conan the Barbarian came out, all of a sudden you had this massive explosion of all these fantasy movies. And you could say around the same time when Friday the 13th came out, there was this massive explosion of horror films, slasher movies. Everybody tried to imitate Friday the 13th. So, and I think with Tron, there was like this sudden explosion of like movies based on, well, not based on video games, but movies centered around people playing video games and certain things happening. Like in Tron, playing a computer game, all of a sudden you're sucked into the computer game world. War Games, it's about a kid that hacks a computer to play video games only to initiate World War III. And The Last Starfighter, you got this kid that plays an arcade game, and all of a sudden he's whisked off into the cosmos to actually become an actual starfighter to fight an intergalactic war that the video game is centered around. The movie was released by Universal in 1984 and was directed by, believe it or not, Nick Castle. Nick Castle, well, you know what? Might as well go ahead and bring it up. Last Starfighter, for many people, I don't know if they even know, this movie has multiple Halloween references littered around it. Halloween as in the Halloween movie franchise. First of all, as I mentioned, it was directed by Nick Castle. Nick Castle will be memorable for Halloween fans as he actually played Michael Myers, or was one of the guys that played Michael Myers in the original Halloween. And I believe he returned to play him yet again for the 2018 movie. The movie also stars Lance Guest, who actually was in Halloween 2, the original one from '81, as Jimmy. He was one of the ambulance workers. Also has Dan O'Harely, which was he played Connell Cochran in Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, and here he plays Grig, Alex's Gunstar navigator in The Last Starfighter, and he's buried under a load of makeup. Catherine Mary Stewart, anybody that's seen Night of the Comet, which actually came out the same year as Last Starfighter, is another film that gone on to become a huge cult favorite. And the film was released by Universal, who did distribute, at least they did distribute Halloween's 2 and 3, Season of the Witch, and they also did the new trilogy of films that came out recently. Pretty much it. Last Starfighter, much like all the other films I reviewed, of course, it was like I said, it was a profitable hit. It did well. It made more than what it cost to make. But of course, there were obviously plans for a franchise. You know, there were probably sequels made and all that, but none of that really happened because the film just didn't do well enough. But as time went on, gradually but surely, it turned into a huge cult favorite. And even to this date, it's still recognized by fans as one of the most memorable sci-fi classics of the 1980s. It's still recognized to this day. And I honestly enjoy the movie thoroughly, and I think it holds up very well. And at the time, one of the things that many fans do talk about in the film, one topic of discussion that often gets brought up when it comes to The Last Starfighter is the visual effects, which honestly at the time were incredible. Now today, yeah, they're kind of primitive because everybody's gone into the whole, special effects have, modernized to a whole new level today. But back then in 1984, seeing CGI visuals like this on the big screen, this blew everybody away. I mean, this was one of the very few movies that came out that dared to take CGI to a whole new level. Unfortunately, yeah, all the space battles, while the Star Wars movies focused on using miniatures to do all the space battles, this movie didn't even use practical miniatures at all. It was all full-on CGI for all the space battles, which at the time, again, was pretty impressive. And I dare say obviously dare saying that the film should have gotten an Oscar nomination for its visuals. I mean, visual effects, that might be going a little too far since, I mean, at the time the Academy refused to give Tron a visual effects nomination because they felt they were cheating. They felt the filmmakers cheated using computers to do the visuals, but that was like the way of the future because eventually James Cameron's The Abyss won the Oscar for visual effects, and the movie had CGI effects using computers, and that's what The Last Starfighter was. But again, I think the visual effects hold up pretty well, and they're still fun to watch. They really are. So this movie, yes, this movie definitely is a technological milestone in visual effects. I'm not going to lie, it really is, and honestly, it holds up very well. I've owned The Last Starfighter. This is actually again my third incarnation of the movie I've owned. I've actually owned the collector's edition DVD by Universal, and then eventually I got the 25th anniversary Blu-ray by Universal, which again is a pretty solid release. And now I finally got this release here by Arrow Video, which I'm not gonna lie, this company is really great. It's like almost like the equivalent of Criterion, because almost every movie they've released on Blu-ray, they've put out some pretty stellar releases. And Last Starfighter is no different. This one's actually a really good release. So this is the get the sleeve off here, if I can. Kind of hard, I'm doing this with one hand. So that's the sleeve, and most of the Arrow titles have reversible cover sleeves. So if I were, this is the one with the actual poster art of the movie. I always like to do this. So that's the poster. Open the case here. Yeah, there's that, and there's supposed to be some, I don't know if there's a booklet in there or not. I don't think when I first got it, because I got this brand new. But there's the Blu-ray, and the artwork on the Blu-ray is pretty incredible. So, the video on the disc, honestly, Arrow does a great job with many of their titles, and Last Starfighter is no exception. Again, the video quality looks amazing. I mean, for a movie made in 1984, in about 2 years, This movie will turn 40, believe it or not. And honestly, the video quality looks stunning. Though, yeah, it's definitely full of grain, but you gotta give Arrow some credit. And it was digitally remastered from a 4K scan. Yeah, brand new restoration. And honestly, it looks good. Though I've actually read somewhere that somebody said that it's not as sharp as the Universal Blu-ray, but still, Arrow's transfer, honestly, is amazing. So out of 5 stars, I would say 4.5. The audio, again, it sounds perfect for a movie of this quality. Since this is a film with a few space battles thrown in, it actually has a plethora of audio tracks to choose from. And let's see if I can find them here. Yeah, uncompressed 2.0 stereo, 5.1 DTS audio, and there's also a 4.0 audio track too. But I think that was the one used for the. I dare say I think that was the one used for the theatrical release. I think. So out of 5 stars for the audio, once again, 4.5. The extras, oh man. Last Starfighter got quite a galaxy of bonus material here to weave through. Let's start off. First of all, on the disc, although, yeah, there's actually 3 audio commentaries to weave through. There was one that was recorded for the Collector's Edition release in 1999, and it's this one here, the archival commentary with Nick Castle and production designer Ron Cobb. It was the one recorded for the Universal Collector's Edition release, and was also used on Universal's 25th anniversary Blu-ray in 2009. And there's 2 new commentaries recorded for this release. One is with Mike White of the Projection Booth podcast. The other is with Lance Guest, Alex Rogan, and his son Jackson Guest, as he looks back on the film. And after you're done weaving through the commentaries, there's a bunch of documentaries to go through, too. You got Maggie's Memories, Revisiting Last Starfighter. It's a new interview with Catherine Mary Stewart. Into the Starscape, Composing Last Starfighter. It's a new composer with composer Craig Safon. Incredible Odds, Writing the Last Starfighter. New interview with screenwriter Jonathan Betul. Not sure how his name's pronounced. Interstellar Hit Beast, Creating the Special Effects. New interview with special effects supervisor Kevin Pike. Obviously, they're the Zandazans in the movie. Excalibur Test, the digital productions. This new interview with sci-fi author Greg Bear on digital productions, company responsible for the CGI in the film. Greetings Starfighter inside the arcade game. It's an interview with arcade game collector Estill Vance on reconstructing the Starfighter game. Yeah, no doubt. That's because after the movie came out, there was a whole lineup of possible, wanting to do video games and merchandise and all sorts of stuff. Because, I mean, come on, this is a space movie with possibilities to do possible movie like a 2D space shooter, more or less. Heroes of the Screen. This is an archive featurette that was made for the 2009 for the 25th anniversary release. Crossing the Frontier, Making of. It was an archival documentary that was made for the Collector's Edition release in '99. Image galleries, theatrical and teaser trailers, and yes, the reversible sleeve, which I think if I pull the disc out here, so if I take out the disc, there's the cover sleeve. It's basically the same as that. But I'm one of those retro guys where I would prefer to see the original cover sleeve right here for the movie. So with the wild amount of bonus material on this disc, it gets a solid 5 for the extras. Although, yeah, the previous incarnations of the movie did have a decent amount of extras for their releases, but yeah, this is arguably the Arrow version definitely gets the best supplemental package, hands down. So for the movie itself, I would say out of 5 stars, I give it a 4.5. Because this movie really is it's almost like a time capsule, taking us back to a great time when sci-fi movies really were a lot of fun, and they just allowed anybody with a great fever pipe dream to come to the big screen, just to give them a chance. And honestly, they took that chance and made it into a reality. And The Last Starfighter, like I said, this movie holds up pretty well over time. So, the Arrow Blu-ray is about $20 brand new, which isn't too bad, but the Universal Blu-ray 25th anniversary you can get that for like $6, brand new. So whichever one you choose to grab is totally up to you. So I would say if you haven't seen the movie, it's definitely worth seeking out. So whatever you choose, but they're both available on Amazon. Like I said, the Arrow version is a bit more expensive, but for $20, that's not too bad. But if you don't feel like spending that much, like I said, the Universal version is only $6, brand new. So if you want to grab that one, go right ahead. But I definitely recommend this movie hardcore. So I don't have, of course, I don't have the soundtrack on CD, but I also have the score by Craig Safan is amazing, by the way. It definitely fits the movie perfectly. So what I have here instead is, much like I have with when I showed with Willow and the Dark Crystal, I actually have a comic book series of The Last Starfighter. I actually have the 3-issue limited series. Once again, special shout out to my buddy Will for giving me these. This actually was, Marvel actually did a 3-part comic series, which I believe came out the same year as the movie itself did. So it basically is the movie in comic book form. So yeah, as you can see, whoa there. So yeah, I mean, it seems to follow the movie pretty well. Yeah, they did Centauri pretty good too. I mean, Left definitely looks like Robert Preston. Very much. That's a tad bit off because in the movie, the speedometer thing read at 303. It says 300 there. Little odd moment. So yeah, I mean, the movie, like I said, it follows the comic. The comic follows the movie pretty well. Yeah, the Zandozan, yeah, just like in the movie. Artwork is pretty impressive too. Very impressive. I could just stare at this all day and have no problem whatsoever. But that's pretty amazing that they actually made a 3-part comic series based on the movie. I don't know if the comics are available. Like I said, it's a limited series, so if any of you out there own the comics, that's pretty cool, but I don't know if you'd actually are lucky enough to find this anywhere. So overall, The Last Starfighter, the last thing I want to point out is I want to say The Last Starfighter was also an influence on many 2D space shooter video games that came out after. I mean, yeah, there were some obviously before The Last Starfighter. I mean, there was Space Invaders, there was Defender, there was Asteroids. We actually had space shooters that came out before The Last Starfighter, but I'm talking about many of the games that came out afterward, like Life Force, which was made by Konami, which came out a couple years after the movie did. And then there were other ones like Gradius, R-Type, Axlay, and many, many others that came out. The Thunder Force game series for Sega Genesis. I mean, I guarantee you, though, this movie had to have had some form of influence on those games because, I mean, The Last Starfighter, you have basically one guy taking on a massive armada of enemies. That's kind of like what those games are like. I mean, if you think about it, Life Force, Gradius, R-Type, and Axlay, yeah, I mean, and Thunder Force are all about basically one little fighter plane taking on an entire armada of massive enemies. And I guarantee you, they must have had this movie was a big influence on them, which is also interesting because this movie did come out the year after the infamous video game crash of '83 when Atari suffered really horribly, but Nintendo and Sega came along to pick up the pieces and keep the video game industry going. But as I said, again, it's totally up to you whether you want to check it, whether you want to think about it or not. As I've said, the movie is strongly recommended. I strongly recommend the movie. The Arrow Blu-ray is arguably the best version of the film to pick up. But as I said, at $20, it's not too expensive. The video and audio are both spectacular. The extras are plentiful. Plenty of stuff to look at. But if $20 is too much for you, you can seek out the Universal version, which is only $6. Not too much there, so again, whichever version of the film you prefer is totally up to you, but the Universal one is easier on your wallet, so. So anyway, this concludes the presentation. I hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and I will continue to keep posting videos in the days to come. So until then, take care and be safe.